You know that feeling when you decide to learn something completely new?
Oh, absolutely.
I'm talking about that very specific mix of excitement and, I don't know, mild terror where you don't quite know the rules yet, but everything just feels fresh.
Yeah, the beginner's mind.
Exactly.
It's actually a concept from Zen Buddhism Shoshin. It's about letting go of your expertise, your preconceptions, and just approaching a subject with the openness of a complete novice. It's a really wonderful state to be in.
It really is, and that is exactly the vibe we are chasing today. But we aren't talking about, learning to paint watercolors or speaking French.
Right.
We are actually talking about the absolute cutting edge of wireless technology. We're looking at Wi-Fi 7, but through a very specific and frankly very cool lens.
We are. We're doing a deep dive into a blog post published essentially today, February 28, 2026. It's from a site called qianmeng.org. And the post is titled Notes on Networking Part 10. Installing Wi-Fi 7 PCIe adapter with MediaTek MT7925 on Linux Kernel 6.17.
It's quite the title. And the author, Qian Meng, he describes himself as an old software plumber.
Which is such a great phrase.
I just love it. It conjures up this image of someone who isn't afraid to get their hands dirty in the digital pipes, fixing leaks and routing data while the rest of us are just scrolling social media.
It's a very apt description for him, too.
Yeah.
If you look at his broader work, he's tinkering with everything from Perl and Python programming to gardening and fish keeping. He is a true hobbyist.
Yeah.
And in this deep dive, we're going to see what happens when an old plumber takes a piece of bleeding-edge hardware, a Wi-Fi 7 adapter, and tries to make it talk to an open-source operating system like Linux.
And here is the mission for everyone listening right now. We want to understand not just the how-to of installing a card, but the actual meaning behind it. Because as we are going to see, the experience he had tells us a lot about where technology is right now in 2026.
It really does. And I think it starts with the context of the whole post.
Right.
He mentions he's been up all night. He's been completely engrossed in this. He says he's wanted to dive into networking for many moons, but usually life just gets in the way.
Which is so relatable. I mean, how many projects do you have on your someday list? I feel like my entire garage is a someday list.
Oh, way too many to count.
Yeah.
But what's fascinating here is why he finally dove in. He explicitly mentions that AI tools helped him cut down the researching time.
That stuck out to me too, because he didn't use AI to do the work for him.
No, not at all.
He didn't say, hey, computer, configure my network. He used it to clear the brush, sort of, so he could get to the fun part, immersing himself in learning the actual tricks.
Yeah, it's a very modern approach to technical hobbies. Instead of spending 10 hours finding the manual or scrolling through these really outdated forums, you spend 10 minutes finding the documentation and then 9 hours experimenting.
Exactly.
It lowers the barrier to entry just enough to make the project fun rather than a massive chore.
So let's look at what he actually bought for this project. Because he didn't go out and buy the most expensive enterprise kit, he found a month-end sale.
A thin wallet purchase, he called it.
Which makes this a great underdog story. He picked up a Wi-Fi 7 PCIe adapter. And for those who might not know, PCIe is that slot inside your desktop computer, usually where you plug in a big graphics card.
Right.
But you can put network cards in there too. And specifically, this one is built by MediaTek.
MediaTek has been a massive player in the chipset world lately. This specific chipset is the MT7925. And importantly, this is all running on a machine with Linux Kernel 6.17.
Okay, let's unpack that for a second. It's 2026, Linux Kernel 6.17. If you were doing this maybe 5 or 10 years ago, buying a brand new, just-released Wi-Fi standard adapter and trying to run it on Linux...
It'd be a total nightmare, absolute nightmare. You have no idea. You would be compiling code manually, hunting for obscure driver files on sketchy forums, probably breaking your entire operating system twice before breakfast.
Just a normal Tuesday.
Pretty much. It was a rite of passage, sure, but a very painful one. You basically expected things not to work on day one.
But that is not what happened here.
It's not at all. He writes in the post, luckily, it works perfectly with Linux Kernel 6.17 without any manual driver installation or extra tweaking.
That is the headline right there. Plug and play on a budget card on Linux.
It speaks volumes about the maturity of the Linux kernel right now and the open source driver ecosystem as a whole. The people writing the code at MediaTek and the Linux community have essentially pre-baked the support into the system before the consumer even plugs the card in.
Yeah.
It's a level of polish we used to only really associate with Apple or high-end Windows machines.
So he plugs it in, turns it on, and it just works. But because he's a software plumber, he doesn't just trust that it works because a green light blinked. He pops open the hood. He goes right into the terminal.
And this is where we get to decode the matrix a little bit. He runs a command called LSPCI.
LSPCI. It sounds like a magic spell.
It basically stands for List PCI. It literally asks the computer's motherboard, hey, what is plugged into your slots? Identify yourself. And the output he gets is really dense, but he breaks it down beautifully in the post.
Yeah, he gets this big string of numbers and text. One of the first things he points out is the code 02A0.
Right. And to the uninitiated, that just looks like random noise. But 02A0 is the class ID. In the language of the motherboard, it identifies the device specifically as a network controller. It basically tells the computer, I am a radio.
And then there are these manufacturer IDs, 14C3 and 7925.
Exactly. So 14C3 is the vendor ID for MediaTek. And 7925, well, that's the chipset model, the MT7925. It's like a digital fingerprint or a DNA sequence. It cannot lie. If the chip says 7925, it is definitely that chip.
And here's where it gets really interesting. The text output actually did lie, or at least it got very confused.
This is one of my favorite parts of his notes. The output listed the device, showed the correct IDs, but the text description right next to it said Broadcom 5762.
Broadcom. But we just established we bought a MediaTek card. Broadcom is a completely different company. Did you get scammed? Did someone just swap the sticker on the box?
No, and this is where the critical thinking comes in. He points out that the Broadcom 5762 is an older gigabit Ethernet controller. That's for wired internet.
Right.
It's a totally different technology. A Wi-Fi 7 card looking like an old wired card, that just doesn't make sense physically.
So why on earth did the computer think his fancy new Wi-Fi 7 card was an old wired network card?
It's a bug in the identification database. Basically, the tool, LSPI, takes those numbers, the 14C3, and it looks them up in a massive text file to find a human-readable name.
Okay.
And somewhere in that massive list, there's likely a mix-up, maybe a duplicated entry, or just a typo.
So the hardware is identifying itself correctly with the numbers, the DNA is right, but the name tag system is slapping the totally wrong sticker on it.
Precisely. And his advice in the post is perfect. He says to safely ignore it. It's a really great lesson for anyone tinkering. Don't always trust the label. Trust the underlying data. The IDs match MediaTek, so it is MediaTek. The text description is just a cosmetic error.
That makes a lot of sense. And he also digs a little deeper into the hardware itself before moving on to the software. He mentions a subsystem ID.
Yes, the Azure Wave. The ID is 1A3B.6003. This is interesting because MediaTek makes the chip, the brain, but they don't necessarily make the whole card you hold in your hand.
Oh, I see.
Right? Azure Wave makes the actual M.2 module, which is the physical little card that slots into the adapter. It just shows how many layers there are in just one piece of hardware.
It's kind of like buying a Ford car, but then finding out the engine is made by someone else and the transmission is made by someone else entirely.
A very apt analogy. And LSI sees all of those different layers.
Okay, so we have identified the hardware. We know it's the right chip, despite the confusing name tag. Now we move to the software side, the driver. And this is where I feel like terms often get used interchangeably. Drivers, firmware, are they just the same thing?
They are crucial partners, but they have very different jobs. And the post gives us a great look at this distinction. He identifies his driver as MT7925.
And he notes that the E at the end stands for PCIe, which makes perfect sense given the card he bought.
Right. So the driver, the MT7925E, is running inside the Linux kernel on your computer's main processor. Think of the driver as the manager or the translator. It knows how to talk to the operating system, and it knows how to shout orders at the hardware.
Okay, so the driver is the manager. So what is the firmware then?
He explains this using the file outputs. He lists these .bin files. And he says, think of them as the specific instructions the driver loads into the Wi-Fi chipset to make it function.
Let me get this straight. If the driver is the manager, the firmware is what? The employee handbook.
Or maybe the actual skills matrix uploaded into the employee's brain every single morning. You have to realize the chipset on the card is actually a tiny computer all by itself. It has its own little processor.
Right.
But it doesn't actually remember how to be a Wi-Fi card when the power is off. It needs its own little program to run.
Yeah.
So the driver grabs that program, the firmware, and says, here, load this so you know how to be a Wi-Fi 7 radio today.
That is a wild way to think about it. Your computer is literally loading software onto your hardware every time it boots up.
Exactly. And he checks the details of these files. He sees a .co extension.
Which stands for kernel object.
Correct. And ., which just means it's compressed to save space. But the most reassuring thing he finds in all this is the timestamp.
Oh, right, the dates. Because we are always told to update our drivers, right?
Yeah, he checks the kernel logs using a command called dmesg, and he sees the firmware build date is December 11, 2025.
Which, considering he is writing this in late February 2026, is incredibly fresh.
It really is. It means he is running code that was compiled just a couple of months ago. In the world of hardware drivers, that is practically brand new. It confirms that his system is using the absolute latest fixes and optimizations. It's not some legacy code from 2023 gathering dust.
So he's got the hardware, he's got the driver, he's got the firmware. The system is ready. But then he notices something interesting about the name of his connection.
Ah, yes, the interface name. It used to be that network interfaces were just called E0 for Ethernet or WLAN 0 for wireless.
Right, keep it simple.
Simple, but highly prone to changing randomly if you moved cards around or even just added a second stick of RAM to your motherboard.
He notes that his adapter has been renamed to WLAN,
which stands for Wireless LAN On Board, or broadly, a predictable network interface name. He actually warns the reader to remember this name because if you're trying to configure your internet later using command line tools, you can't just type Wi-Fi. You have to type WLAN. It's the specific address for that specific card.
But then while he's looking at these names, he spots a ghost, a second interface he wasn't expecting at all.
P2P Dev WLAN.
It sounds like some kind of developer tool. What is that doing there?
He was surprised too. He notes in the blog, the P2P Dev WLAN interface is new to me. But being the researcher he is, he looked it up. It stands for peer-to-peer device.
Peer-to-peer, so device to device, without a router in the middle.
Precisely. He mentions it's used for Wi-Fi Direct or screencasting.
Oh, like when I want to beam my phone screen to my TV, or just send a file directly to a laptop.
Exactly that. Historically, on Linux, getting screencasting or Wi-Fi Direct to work was, well, let's just say it was character building.
Character building is just code for impossible, isn't it?
Usually it meant 3 days of editing config files and crying, but the fact that this interface popped up automatically by default on this new Wi-Fi 7 card, it suggests that Linux is getting ready to handle these consumer features natively.
That's huge.
It is. It's not just about connecting to the internet anymore. It's about connecting to the ecosystem of devices around you.
He seems pretty excited about that discovery. He says, we'll explore this in future. It just opens up a whole new playground for him.
And that ties right back to the beginner's mind. He bought the card just to get faster internet, but he discovered a whole new capability screencasting, P2P, that he can now tinker with. It's a bonus feature he didn't even know he was paying for.
So after all this detective work decoding IDs, checking firmware dates, finding mystery interfaces, he finally does the thing the card was actually made for.
He connects to the router.
Right. The basic function.
He uses the command line, of course, a tool called nemsily. He verifies the connection, and it works. The client-side setup is officially done.
And he signs off with a promise. He says, we'll explore configuring the router to enable Wi-Fi 7 features.
Which is a really important distinction. Just because your computer has a Wi-Fi 7 card doesn't mean you're getting Wi-Fi 7 speeds yet. Your router needs to speak the exact same language. That is clearly his next project.
I want to zoom out a bit here. We walked through the technical steps, but what does this post really tell us about the state of being a tech enthusiast or a software plumber today in 2026?
You know, there's a really poignant moment in his About section and the intro where he talks about Floss-Free Libre and open source software.
Yeah, he's been tinkering with this stuff night long. He lives and breathes it.
For a long time, using open source software felt like a compromise. You traded convenience for freedom. You used Linux because you believed in the philosophy, not because it was easier. You just accepted that your Wi-Fi might not work on day one.
But the story flips that script entirely.
It does completely.
Yeah.
He bought a cheap card, plugged it in, and it worked better than some Windows installs I've seen. The compromise is disappearing. The open source ecosystem represented here by kernel 6.1 CM is catching up to, and in some cases leading, hardware support.
And the role of the tinkerer is changing too, wouldn't you say?
How so?
Well, look at what he's doing. He's not spending his night writing a driver from scratch because the manufacturer forgot to make one. He's spending his night exploring P2P dev interfaces and planning how to optimize his router. He's moving up the stack.
That's a really great observation. The plumbing is becoming more reliable, so the plumber can focus on, well, maybe architecture is the better word now. He's building a system, not just fixing a leak.
And he's using AI to help him get there. That admission earlier, that AI cut down the research time, is key. It didn't replace the joy of discovery. It enabled it.
It removed the friction.
Yeah.
If he had spent 4 hours searching for what E280 meant, he might have been too tired to care about the firmware date. By getting those answers quickly, he could go deeper.
Yeah.
He could verify the Broadcom bug. He could learn about the P2P interface. It's just a more efficient way to learn.
It's deep diving made accessible.
Exactly.
So what is the takeaway for you listening today? Maybe you aren't running Linux. Maybe you don't even know what a PCIe slot looks like. Why does this late-night hacking session matter to you?
I think it matters because it shows that technology is becoming more accessible and more transparent if you are willing to just look. We often treat our devices like black boxes, magic rectangles that give us internet.
But they aren't magic.
No. They are collections of chips, drivers, firmware, and logic. He shows us that with a few commands, you can see the name of the company that built the chip.
Yeah.
You can see the date the code was written. You can see the ghosts in the database.
It empowers you. You aren't just a user, you're an owner.
Precisely. And in a world where everything is increasingly locked down, having that beginner's mind to just peek behind the curtain, even if it's just to see what model of Wi-Fi card you have, is a rebellious and joyful act.
I love that. A rebellious and joyful act. And who knows, you might find something cool.
You really might. And honestly, hearing about Wi-Fi 7 features, the speed, the low latency, makes me want to go check my own router settings right now.
I knew you were going to say that. You're already planning your upgrade, aren't you?
I can't help it. If kernel 6.17 is ready, I need to be ready. I want to see those speeds.
Well, he is certainly ready. He's got his Wello interface up and running. He's validated his firmware. And he's signed off until the next post.
Where presumably, you will tackle the router side of the equation.
We will definitely have to keep an eye out for part 11 of Notes on Networking.
Definitely.
So here's a question to leave you with. We talked about how Linux is handling bleeding-edge tech like Wi-Fi 7 seamlessly on day one. We are reaching a point where tinkering isn't about fixing broken things anymore. It's about exploring capabilities.
Right. If the driver just works, what do you do next?
Exactly. If the barrier to entry is gone, what will you build? What will you explore? Maybe it's time to adopt that beginner's mind this weekend. Open up a terminal, or just the settings menu you usually ignore.
See what's really under the hood? You might find a bug, like that Broadcom label. You might find a new feature, like the P2P interface.
Or you might just find that joy of discovery that an old software plumber found at 3 a.m. on a Saturday in 2026.
And that is worth the price of the adapter alone.
Thanks for listening to this deep dive. Go break something, or better yet, go fix something. We'll see you next time.
Stay curious.